Brett, first of all, before starting, as I mentioned behind the scenes, like I really thank you for all the knowledge that you put on LinkedIn, and sometimes in the subjects that I post. So thank you for that. And I was very eager to bring you here because I think you can add a lot of value to both like administrators, but also like students to have like a bit more context of like what the collegiate scene is. So thank you very much. So if you want to make a brief intro about yourself, that would be amazing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Ivan, I'm so excited just to be here. The way in which you've approached LinkedIn and the consistency with which you are engaging the entire community and watching all of these people kind of come together to the table is one of the biggest reasons why I engaged. I just saw it come to the table, and it wasn't like we were pre-deciding who was going to get to speak. And in the times where I did offer an alternative voice than what was maybe the rest of the comments, I still felt heard and I still felt engaged with. And I thought that was fantastic. So kudos to you. You're doing a great job in making sure all of the voices are being heard. And I really appreciate that.
Well, that's my objective, that we can all learn from each other. And the only way to push, this team forward is, if we can all communicate and work together. Okay. Maybe
Yeah.
in the long term, when everything is more developed, we can compete against each other. But for now, we're just we have to build together. We can't
Oh,
afford to do
absolutely.
that.
And I mean, I'm a hyper competitive person, so I love the idea of competing, but not at the cost of another. And I think when I look at my place in esports and why I'm here, in back in 2019, right before the pandemic happened, my youngest basically came to his mom and I and said, "Listen, I'm not going to do this whole college thing. I want to be a pro esports player." And I went, "Oh, okay. I don't really know what you mean, but let's figure it out. Let's go look. Let's go see what's happening." And so he had some challenges and some homework he had to do, and he thrived. He did really, really well. And so we ended up taking him to a local college to just practice on the PCs while he was waiting for his to be delivered. And while he was there, the Overwatch open tryout happened, and we met the coach. The coach invited him in and said, "Yeah, absolutely. Come play, come hang out." And so the coach came to me at the end of the first night and said, "Listen, your son's the best kid in the room." I'm like, "Oh, well, okay." Not really sure what that means. Like, we've been at this for about, 7 or 8 weeks. He goes, "Wow. Okay." So we came back the second night, and the coach placed him with all the gold players, all the terrible players. And he still thrived, even though they didn't win any games, but he still performed. He still, outdid himself. The coach came to me at the end of that second night and said, "Have you ever considered letting your son play video games full time?" I'm like, "No, I have not considered taking him out of school." Long story, very short. 3 days later, we unenrolled him from his high school on his, I guess it would technically be his sophomore year of high school, his 10th grade. And we let him play video games full time. And it has been a whirlwind of a ride. But the first thing that we recognized is the level of toxicity in coaching. We talk about negativity and toxicity in gaming and the culture of gaming. I was not prepared for how athletes and players were being treated. It was unbelievable to me how toxic it was. Up at that point, I had spent the last 25 years working in community youth support, nonprofit organizations, working with families, working with kids. I'd coached traditional sports throughout. Coached football, I've coached baseball, I've coached rugby. I've done a lot of that just because kids needed support. And I watched my youngest enter into a space where there was zero support and into the negative side of it. And I sat at the foot of my bed, just ugly crying, if you can fathom, and recognizing there was a need for someone to come in and be a voice as a father. And that's probably my biggest bias. I am a father first. I'm not an academic, although I've just finished my master's, which is so exciting. But I'm not here as a researcher. I'm not here as an academic. I'm here as a father, because I want there to be a safe place for kids to grow and develop both in their game, but also beyond the game. The average retirement age of a professional athlete in esports is somewhere between 21 and 23 years old. Well, what do they do after that? Yeah.
Some go to college.
Some go to college. Yep.
They transition, or how they call it, retire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do you think, like, can you put an example of toxicity in coaching, and like, why do you think it happens? Do you think that they're not that well prepared to call themselves coaches, or what does that happen?
Well, I think that one of the biggest elements is traditionally within esports coaching, esports organizations have taken their most prominent or best athlete, they've retired, but they want to keep them in the organization, so they give them the tag of coach. And that player or that athlete does not have the training or developmental abilities to actually coach. At a research level, one of the things we've recognized is that esports athletes have spent the most part of their preparation time before college or before a professional career alone, in the dark, in a bedroom, behind a screen. Where if you look at traditional sports, they're spending time on the pitch, on the court, on the field with other players and coaches, building into their life. Esports players are very unique in that they don't necessarily have that specific type of experience. And so when they're coming into their collegiate space or they're coming into the professional scene, they don't even yet know how to be a teammate, let alone how to be a person within a community so tight or so tightly knit together as an esports team needs to be. Now you take that athlete who has thrived professionally. They've got all the championships. They've got all the things, but they don't know how to teach somebody else how to do what they did. They just did it. It became so natural to who they were. And I think that the unfortunate reality is that the lack of philosophical, the lack of psychological training, the lack of human connectivity or development training, a lot of these coaches are just grinding like they did as players, but then they're grinding through human beings to find the best player that they can find, or the best, I don't even want to necessarily say player or athlete. They're just looking for the avatar. Who's the best person at this role, and how many people do I have to go through to get to them?
Yeah. It's like in traditional sports, like the best athlete was usually the coach. When like back in the day, then like I remember like in sports teams in soccer, La Liga or football, whatever you want. Like it was like the administration of the clubs were like ex-players or like people that came in from the business world and got themselves in the sports world, and the consumer behavior was way different. Also, they took emotional decisions. So most of the clubs were owned by the banks. So now it's a bit more professionalized. Sports management degrees, at least for the past 20 years have been more, it's even a niche, sports management, but like still like now people are professionalizing, learning, and holding companies are getting, a hold of clubs and treating it as a business, that is profitable than before. And it's a process, but like I really want to get into what you mentioned about like the philosophical aspect and everything. Like you mentioned before, like how in life that 3 programs had like coaching classes, and none of those programs like taught a philosophy class. Why is that important?
I know that the space in Canada, so I'm in Canada, and the traditional collegiate or university programs are being run through an academic space. Now, that academic space varies depending on the school, because it's depending on the capacity of which department can host an esports program. But now we have academic departments that don't necessarily have a connection to sports. They don't have a connection to athletic development or varsity development, because we don't even really like. Yes, we have sports departments in our colleges and universities, but they're run secondarily. They don't have a primary department that you would connect to per se. And so then, as these departments are building out their program, they're being tasked with building, and it usually is being covered through the business development, or like you were saying, the sports management program side, where they're learning esports business management. And so there is not esports philosophy. There is not an esports development in program in Canada. And so my oldest, who's now a Radiant level Valorant coach, he's worked himself really, really hard playing the game to be at the highest level of the game. But then he also had the heart to be a coach. But his school didn't even offer a single elective course that he could have taken at the root of what it means to coach in gaming and esports, because there are so few coaches in the esports industry. They're not coming over to academic departments to teach a course. So, and the football coach doesn't know enough about esports, so they're not coming over to help develop a system or a curriculum or anything like that. And so the philosophical and the psychological side, we need to find a way to build bridges into some of these esports programs to provide these kind of electives.
Don't you think like the football coach can teach a philosophy class or coaching class to the esports program? There's some points that can transfer.
So there's a fascinating story out of TSM's League of Legends team, so Top Solo Mid. They brought in a professional NFL coach. He was an assistant coach. I can't remember which team he was with, and I don't have a name on hand. Somebody can fact check me. But the players refused to play for him because he had never played video games. They just refused. They said, no, I'm not playing for him. They didn't end up remaining in the position because the players just simply said no. And I was like, okay, like you have the opportunity to be coached and developed as a human being. And then that coach was like, I want to learn as much as I want to teach. We don't necessarily have these type of roles when it comes to coaching. So when we look at the traditional philosophy around coaching, we have an altruistic coach, which is my way or the highway. We have the diplomatic coach, which is the loudest voice is heard. We have the developmental coach, which is solely focused on making players better. And then we'll have a holistic, which is a hybrid of any two of those. In esports, we traditionally have only seen the altruistic coach. Maybe a little bit of developmental on that, but we don't have a democratic and we don't have a holistic version of coaching in esports. For the most part, at tier 1 and your tier 2 academy level stuff, all of it is my way or the highway. You either do what I tell you to do or you don't get on the team. And this becomes very problematic with a generation such as the Gen Zs and now the emergent Gen Alpha that are not willing to be treated in that way, if that makes any sense.
Why do you think is that? Because there's a lack of coaches, of coaches capable of coaching a tier 1 and tier 2 team. Like, why do you think?
Well, we just look at the percentages, right?
Yeah.
So I have percentages of athletes. So currently, globally, there's somewhere between 28,000 and 31,000 professionally paid tier 1 athletes. Now that does bleed a little bit into your your academy level teams. So how we classify that is if you are receiving remuneration to play a video game that does not include school or boarding. So you're being paid a salary or money to play a video game. 28 to 31,000 players globally. If you divide that down by 5, 6, 7 players, we have a very small number of coaches globally. And so because there's so few, there are not really jobs or roles that you could just simply step into. So a college is going to go, well, I can't have a program like that because there's no guarantees for a job on the other side. But that's because we're not developing grassroots programs. We're not developing high school programs or junior school programs where they actually need coaches, which would be a perfect place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go into the comment section because and there's some questions and also some statements, and I want you to have your own, like if you can expand on that. But like Roma is here. So hello, proud graduate of NCI, now lecturer at AWF in Warsaw, oldest Polish sport university. We've started an 8-module esports program with some ethics for sure, and a lot of holistic knowledge like wellness and mental coaching. The biology module covers ergonomics, the psychology and biochemistry of physical exercise, biological regeneration, and support in esports and sports nutrition. So social relationships, team communication, pedagogy, sociology, and sports management module. So they have a pretty complete, and we're hopeful bring the next gen of esports coaches. All our students are players, of course, so it's happening now. What the pro world lacked to fulfill, only for explorers to coach, which is a limited number to the favor of holistically trained ones. Yeah, that's what she said in general. So yeah,
I love that. And then she typed in Ontario. Roman, can you confirm if you're in Ontario, Canada? If so, let's connect. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect further. This was one of my goals, was to get into a space where we can really start looking at what do our esports athletes look like at the end of their collegiate career. In that, whether it's a collegiate career or professional career, what are the ingredients needed for them to be whole, to be complete, to have had an amazing esports experience in college, but they got an even better academic career that is pushing them out into their future.
Yeah. And also going more like into the esports program thing, because I'm also very interested in that. Like, because like there's esports programs that are they want to align with athletics, and many programs with other departments. Do you see programs in the medium long term going into athletics, or do you think like the university will decide where esports lands? Because also some leagues only allow varsity teams. As more teams leagues arise, like I think there's like 3 more, and they have like different regulations. Last week I was talking to Ben, a student, and he was like, one of the biggest, like the burnout comes from like all these different leagues played throughout all the year, and like different rules. So it's like we're coaching specifically a video game, we're coaching, like we're training to compete in that league, but then on the other league, like there's things that are allowed or not allowed. So it's like yeah. So where do you see that?
I think that, sorry, I'm going to ask you to reframe that question a little bit, because there was a lot and I kind of got lost in the middle.
Yeah, my bad.
No,
basically, do you see esports programs tending to go more into athletics, or do you feel like every university will have their say into what department it will fall, and there's not going to be like a joint decision making, like in sports?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Under athletics. So
I think yes. I think every esports program needs to move towards varsity athletics. I think that classification needs to come, but I think that needs to be more so because of the upcoming Olympics. This is going to change the landscape of academic esports and even much of the professional side of esports, which, I mean, I find fascinating that organizations such as Luminosity have now sold off their esports teams, their entire esports division, but they haven't even gotten to the Olympics yet. What are they seeing that we're not? Which is something that I'm going, I'm wondering what's kind of happening there. But I think with
What
the
do you think is
conclusion of,
happening?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that the marketing model is broken for sure. I don't think professional organizations have the same means to make money as they did 3 or 4 years ago. And rather than cultivating a better marketing system, they just took all the money and spent all the money through COVID and everything else. The way that thing blew up and then imploded so quickly, they could have had a better long-term vision at the financials. An esport athlete shouldn't have been paid $1 million a year. I'm sorry. I love them. They're all amazing. But $1 million a year to play a video game? No.
Yeah. Some of the students that we work with, like, have been in the semi-pro or pro, like competing, and they all say the same. It was like now X League in tier 2 has dropped. My team, has dropped, or like we're getting PDS, and it was because like of all the investment and the revenue that they were generating wasn't, they didn't match with the investment. So now there's this correction.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that correction. And this is where I'm excited about organizations such as NACE. I mean, there's several organizations here in Canada that are really starting to get this groundswell. But I know in Canada, one of the big roadblocks that we're facing is we have such as an Olympic committee in Canada that refuses to recognize esports as a valid Olympic sport, even though the Olympics has identified esports as valid. So our players are not going to get the opportunity to play in the Olympics because Canada has decided, no, we don't want to recognize that. I'm like, why?
It wasn't sold adequately, or it's just the management is like, no. Like,
I haven't been at those tables. I would have loved to kind of at least been in the room to kind of help cultivate how we were going to present. But I know that there's some amazing individuals across Canada who are so passionate and excited about this, but the doors are just continually being closed. And my biggest theory would be the pushback is coming out of the Canadian Olympic Committee, not out of, misrepresentation, so to speak, on the esports side. I just think there's too many voices that are louder than esports that are still controlling the fate of esports, particularly in Canada.
Okay. There's another, like, I can't read his name, but like it's like he's asking, what we've seen recently is that students, by and large, a lot of the time are disinterested in traditional education models to learn a lot of this information, which is why there is a lot of pushback to many of the esports curricula that's currently available.
Yeah.
If there's only a carrot dangled in front of them saying, oh, you get to play after you learn all of this, their attention span is limited and become frustrated. Varsity athletics is necessary for esports as a whole. I agree, Bret. But what about the students interested in esports that don't want entirely to commit to the competitive side?
It is long. I was reading along with you. That is probably the best way to frame this. And I want to know who you are. So please send me a friend request on LinkedIn, because I'm like, I want to connect with you for sure. I think that what we're seeing is the lack of recognition of esports in esports programs. So I spoke earlier to the Canadian system. The esports curriculum is really business management or some other program, and they've just put the title esports business management on top of it. You might get 1 or 2 courses that's specific to esports. You might get a guest speaker that comes in and gives a talk, but the curriculum has not fully invested itself in esports. You can use the language of, but not the content, and you lose the student. You can completely embrace the student, their identity, their space, their digital culture, their digital context, and not have a lot of e-sport language, and you've completely hooked the student because they're learning the values that are present to their generational context and their workforce, their kind of work function during school, after school, and hopefully in their esports things. For me, I want to work through and help manage the digital avatar relationship. How do we maintain the human connection to that digital component? And our programs need to reflect that, so that the students, as this user has mentioned, so that the students are engaged in the development of what they're learning. They have a voice in it, really. That's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gave me a lot to think. Yeah. So how do you also face this AI thing in the education that we were talking about, and also, like, how do you think, like, Gen Z's and Gen Alphas are going to, like, you kind of mentioned it right now, but, like, how do you think we can engage them even more? Because, like, also, like, for example, in my university, I'm like the only teacher in his 30s. The rest are like 50s, 60s. Yeah. And I do, like, I teach them, because also for my business, I do use tools that they may know, or they're interested, like, whoa, you can do this, but, like, other teachers maybe is the more, like, things that have been going on for, like, it's super useful, but, like, students also want a bit of, like, like, how can I use this tools, or this, instead of, like, just case studies about all this. So, like, how would you reframe education? I know it's like, this is takes on, like, talk, but, like, if you could briefly explain that.
Yeah, so this was actually one of the core elements of my master's thesis, is that one of the ideas that I recognized fairly early on with the introduction of AI is that the process of learning has completely been dismantled according to traditional education models. And so we're now at a space where, and I use, I'm not a math person, although I love I love the way algebra operates, but at the basic level, because I'm an A plus B equals C kind of person. But let me work this out. And so traditional education over the last 60, 75 years has been around knowledge acquisition and then knowledge retention. So the way in which students have learned within the school system as it is, I am taught something, I now tell you what I was taught. I don't actually have to incorporate that. I just have to be able to tell you what I learned. And so that was the pass-fail context. And so then as education has moved forward, we are now at a space where knowledge at the digital context is global and it's instant. I can know right now what's happening in Japan, Australia, Germany, the UK, South America. I can know instantly through any number of the social media platforms that I have access to. So knowledge is no longer something that I need to search for. I have it at my fingertips. I can fact check my teacher within 5 seconds of something that they've said if I have access to my phones, which, again, schools choosing not to allow phones in the classroom, I think, is short-sighted, but necessary to a certain degree. And we'll maybe touch on that. But so then what do we do? Now that we have all this knowledge, what do we need to do to create learning? It's experience. It's not the ability for me to tell you what I've learned. It's my ability to show you what I've learned. So when I take that knowledge and I apply it to my experiences, that is where wisdom is developed. That was where wisdom should be the thing we're always after.
Yeah.
There was a time knowledge was enough, but not knowing what to do with that knowledge has become the greatest deficit of our emergent academic students. They don't know what to do with what they've learned or how to do.
And how I captivate them more is when I teach them stuff that they can't search on YouTube. That comes from wisdom. like
Yes.
what, like from 5 years in each portion, like I use this, I did this, and then you apply it to the material in the curriculum. But like in every piece of thing that you have to cover in the material, you give a personal experience, and that's how
Yep.
they retain the information, rather than just
Yes.
like reading through the information and be like, okay, now let's do a test or whatever. Like it's like when
Yep.
you put an example from your experience in what you're trying to talk, that's how they get it, and that's how they
Mhm.
engage more. So that's what I found.
And
Yeah.
that's the game changer. So going back
Yeah.
to my youngest and his story in his academia. So when we pulled him out of school, within 3 weeks, he's like, Dad, do you have a book I can read about learning about my teammates? Because I'm not connecting to them. I'm like, oh, as a matter of fact, I do. And I pulled off the 5 Languages of Appreciation by Paul White off my bookshelf. This is how you talk to people. This is how you engage with them. And he read that book, came back to me 3 weeks later. What else you got, Dad? I need more. And so within the first 3 months of him not being in school, he'd done university level book reports for me, because we were homeschooling. We were trying to we wanted to make sure something was still being integrated, right? And so I think that the bringing knowledge, but then applying it directly to the experiences that I'm having, where our esports academia programs are not using esports to teach. They're teaching about something outside of esports, but they've changed some of the language, but there's no integration. So when the student graduates with an esports business management program, they could not go and manage esports programs. They just couldn't do it because they don't know how to do it. They weren't provided a means to launch their own high school grassroots esports program, which every college in my region, at least, probably has 15 to 20 high schools within a stone's throw of that college. You could have 10 students go and launch an esports team at all of those schools. Now you have a little mini league. Now you have a little testing space for them to both test their philosophy, test their acquisitions of coaching elements. How are they taking the academics and they're putting it into real life experiences? This is where coaching matters. This is where it would make a difference.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And
I got excited about that one.
Why is it not being applied? Is it's too new? People, there's no interest, there's no incentive. Like, what's the...
I think because most of the academic leaders of these programs are not esports people themselves. They've either played limited video games, no video games. It's been thrown into the arts department. It's not even in the sports department. It's not even in the history department, because they had room within their academic culture to then create something that was esports, but it wasn't sports. It wasn't geared to the students that are coming into these programs. And because of these variations, no one is really speaking to the athlete. No one is speaking to the student. They're speaking from the institution to the institution.
Yeah, that's why, like, not the students who are the university at work, but like with the students at work, like sending them to US and Canada, I always be like, okay, like one of the most important things when choosing a degree, especially like in esports management, which I always recommend them do something in sports management, mix it with the sports management or business management. Because like if you have a business degree, you can work in sports and esports. If you have a sports management, you can work in sports and esports. So like always mix it. But like also it's like, who are the teachers, behind the program? Because first of all, by experience, you're gonna learn a lot. And second, the networking. Like I'm like, the best thing that you can get in uni, apart from what you learn, is like the network of teachers and who they can connect you with. That's that's why at the beginning of the class, I'm like, guys, add me on LinkedIn, okay, and research my network. And if someone interests you, I'll connect you with them. And it's about like also the network, like who's teaching that degree. That I was like, guys, research it. That's not just because of the competitive program or because they're whatever, like also who are the people behind it.
So I actually wrote a 3-semester, 1.5 year long coaching curriculum for esports. And I have yet to have a single school say yes. I've presented it to probably 10 different schools now. None of them have said yes. And one of the biggest factors of my curriculum is every piece of homework is done on social media. Every part of your homework is about engaging with LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat. I don't care where you post it, but all of your homework will be tested by the audience of the people that are actually in the space that you're trying to get into.
Yeah.
And then watching these students grow in their wisdom, their knowledge, their application, according to Ivan's going to respond to so-and-so's post, because that's a little sideways, right? Have you thought about this? And now all of a sudden, we as a community are now actually engaging everybody that's coming into the industry. We're not in competition per se, but that we're now saying this next generation of esports leaders needs to be cultivated by everybody that's in the space right now.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a class I teach, sports career development, which I like how to build your LinkedIn profile and how to engage, how to network, how to engage with alumni for internships or for jobs and stuff like that. And it's basically what you mentioned. And I always tell them, if you are not sharing what you know, okay, someone that knows less than you and is doing it will get a job before you. Also, recruiters, okay, are basically looking at specific profiles, or a recruiter that has a meeting with you. Before the meeting, they will check your social media. If you're in, like, if you post consistently or engage, they'll know, like, before they are in a call with you, they'll already know about you. So the call is the first call is gonna be like less of a so it's very important. It's
so key.
So to finish, I had a few questions prepared, okay, that so what's the most overlooked quality of an effective coach from all that you talked today?
I think probably, based on the coaches that I've come to know who've been in the industry for quite some time, it's empathy and compassion for the individual path. Like, a lot of coaches don't necessarily have the transferable skill of do X to get Y, or Y to get X, or whichever. Like, we don't have the transfer skills based coaching currently. So we have I'm telling you what to do, go figure it out. But we don't now have a relationship. We don't have the empathy. We don't have the compassion. I think, and that is as one of the big problems for that also exists within the developmental side of esports, where they're tweaking games every week. So you can have an athlete who's really, really good at one avatar or one agent, and to use Valorant as an example. But if they reduce the damage or something in regards to something, now all of a sudden that athlete, that human being has now lost a step, but they didn't lose it was their character that lost a step. And another character was buffed. And so we have a problem with how that's cultivated at the human level, because again, athletes are now pushed aside very, very quickly because there's no coaching involved in it. And I think that becomes problematic for sure. So empathy and compassion, and then the ability to transfer scene abilities to skill-based abilities.
Amazing. Okay. Also, what's one thing that you would fix tomorrow in the collegiate esports scene?
Every school have at least one coaching philosophy course. And I don't care who's teaching it. It can be it could be the racquetball coach. I don't care. But some aspect of coaching elective within every single program globally. And out of it, we will find good coaches. It's not enough to have one, but if I could change one thing tomorrow, which again, a lot of schools have either started now or starting next week, having an elective within the next 4 to 5 months for everyone to learn a little bit about what a coach is dealing with or managing.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, you touched on it, but what's a book, a resource, or a mentor that influenced your coaching philosophy?
Whew, that's a big one. I think
One
that
thing.
yeah, like there's so I mean, I've been a bit of an assessment junkie since the early 90s. Yeah, I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
old. And so the idea of what it means to have this holistic view of the human nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really appreciated Paul White's book, that five languages of appreciation, for
Mm-hmm.
building team cohesiveness. Like, how do we build relationships with one another that fuels each other? And that always starts with knowledge, and then experiences, then developing community. I love our friend here on LinkedIn, EQ. Emotional IQ is this much needed skill, and the micro coach, the coach that has the highest degree of micro skills, usually suffers from the emotional or relational skills deeply, because their whole life has been centered on how do I become the best player, not the best coach. And so I think that's one of the shifts we're going to start to see is you're going to have a lower experience level at the micro, but you're going to have a much higher human skills. How do we connect with one another? I think
Yeah.
Simon Sinek. Now, this isn't in coaching. This isn't in esports at all. Simon
Yeah.
Sinek is an amazing leader, and I just use one of his great phrases: human skills. So we don't talk about soft skills. We talk about the human skills. We talk about what it means to be in a relationship with other humans.
Yeah.
And I think that, and you could choose leaders eat last,
Mm-hmm.
finding your why, and his third book is escaping me at the moment. But yeah, I think Paul White, Five Languages of Appreciation, any of Simon Sinek's work or videos or TED Talks and such, his generational question is a powerful 15 minutes. You can find on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. It's the most watched TED Talk, I believe, or it was at one point.
Yeah. Amazing. Brett, is there something that we haven't talked about that you would like to touch on?
We've touched on so many topics. I
Yeah.
would be amiss to throw anything else into the hat right now. This has just been fantastic. So
Yeah.
I think the idea of how do institutions build a framework that is understanding the volatility of their own situation and keeping their doors open, understanding the needs of the students that we are producing, and then how are we building leaders in the middle of that? And that's kind of where my research is taking me right now.
Yeah. I think also universities need teachers that are more, of course, universities have that, but I think they need more of professionals that are in the industry, like in a certain position or building a company that can teach a class, because that's how students can stay up to date, instead of just having your PhD in how many years ago and then just teaching kind of the same things, something like that, maybe from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And I think that the time is going to be the greatest revelation of kind of whether this is going to succeed or fail. As we lean towards the Olympics, this is where we're going to see. So
Time always is, no matter what industry. Yeah. Also, Matthew Hickson, to coach better, actually have some skin in the game. Your athletes won't respect you initially if you don't even play the game.
And I mean, I spoke to that earlier with the situation at TSM.
Yeah.
So, and I think that honestly, that's a short-sighted view on the player side, because there are a lot of amazing people out there that do have significant things to offer them in the human side of it, not just the gaming side of it. We forget that average retirement age, 23 years old, 21 years old. Kids are stopping playing. They're coming into different school and academic programs. That's great. But what are they doing if there's not a true transferable skill set coming out of academics into esports? That hasn't yet been developed wholly. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to then build into this? And that's yeah. Wow, Roma's been around for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, also agreed, it's short-sighted, but we were initially young-minded, unfortunately. Yeah.
And that's the empathy and compassion component, right? Mm-hmm. Having academic leaders, having institutions that are understanding of this. And so then they're going to bring in an Ivan in your 30s, where the academic departments are in their 50s and 60s. They're bringing you in because they value what you're doing. And so they bring you in and they stand behind you and say, this is the guy that we need to listen to. And that's what I saw on LinkedIn. That's why I engaged with your post. This is the guy that I want my sons to listen to. Because, yes, you. I don't, they're not going to listen to me. I'm their dad. Like, it's not going to happen. But they'll listen to you because there's value there. They'll listen to the other people that you've had on your calls and your talks. And all of them are valuable and important. But how do we now draw the athlete to those voices? And that's the trick. That's the hard part.
Yeah, amazing. Bret, thank you so much for being here. For sure, in a few months we have to do another one. Like, amazing.
Well,
amazing.
I look forward to it. Maybe at that point I'll actually be in an academic program where I am kind of helping guide the institutional path and finding out what this, if my theories are even on the radar of somebody. So,
yeah.
Yep. Amazing. It's been